The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Since we've been talking so much lately about what I consider to be a terrible alliance between the United States and extremist Wahhabist Saudi Arabia, I was thrilled to see that Fareed Zakaria asked President Obama in an interview about his upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia, and he actually tried to get some kind of opinion from President Obama about the 1,000-lash punishment sentence that has been assigned to the Saudi Arabian blogger. And President Obama did not answer. I will play for you what he did say, and you will see basically just standard political posturing and redirection.
Will you speak about the blogger to the Saudis?
You know, I think on this visit, obviously, a lot of this is just paying respects to King Abdullah, who, in his own fashion, represented some modest reform efforts within the kingdom. But we have maintained a sustained dialogue with the Saudis and with all the other countries that we work with. You know, what I've found effective is to apply steady, consistent pressure, even as we are getting business done that needs to get done. And oftentimes that makes some of our allies uncomfortable. It makes them frustrated. Sometimes we have to balance our need to speak to them about human rights issues with immediate concerns that we have in terms of countering terrorism or dealing with regional stability. But the trend line is one that I will sustain throughout the rest of my presidency, and that is to make an argument to those friends and allies of ours that if they want a society that is going to be able to sustain itself in this age, then they're going to have to change how they do business.
Would you say, Lewis, that he certainly ducked the question there when it comes to will you talk to them about the fact that they're punishing bloggers with 1,000 lashes?
He essentially ducked the question. He addresses, I think he makes it clear that he doesn't like it. I think he makes it clear that in some ways he is trying to pressure these types of allies into, more, I don't know, responsible behavior.
You could see it two ways, right? Which is, well, he's taking a soft approach with regard to his language, but he's telling us that he's trying to influence them behind the scenes. But the other point of view would be, well, he was directly asked about an insane, egregious incident, and he did not address that at all. So you could really interpret the answer two ways.
You can. But I understand why he answered the question this way. Whether or not he likes this alliance. I mean, it seems to be an important one for this country. So unfortunately, that's the way it is.
And he did mention what we discussed, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before, which is that there is a shared interest in terms of keeping the region stable in the Middle East for different reasons. Saudi Arabia and the U.S. both have significant interests in stability in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia so that it does not disrupt their oil business. And President Obama did mention that. And that really is so much at the root of what is going on. It is not just because of the oil dependency, which, to be quite honest, is not as large as many Americans might think. The American dependence on foreign oil from Saudi Arabia specifically, I forget the number specifically off the top of my head, but is not as high as many would imagine. But the role that Saudi Arabia's stability in terms of oil prices globally has is pretty significant.
Of course, it's huge. And we are using more of our own oil than ever, and it has helped prices a bit, and it helped us become more independent. But of course, we got to get off that stuff altogether.
Michelle Obama is both being criticized and praised for the fact that during this visit with President Obama to Saudi Arabia, she chose not to wear a headscarf. She joined President Obama for this visit to kind of offer condolences for the death of Saudi Arabian King Abdullah. And Michelle Obama, the First Lady, stepped off of Air Force One wearing long pants and a brightly colored jacket with no headscarf, and under the kingdom's strict dress code for women. Saudi females are required to wear a headscarf and loose black robes in public. Most women in Saudi Arabia cover their hair and face with a veil, but covering one's head is not required for foreigners, and some women from other countries choose to forego the headscarf altogether. Some of the delegation of Saudi officials did shake Michelle Obama's hand. Some kind of just nodded to her and made no physical contact, and all sorts of criticism. And the criticism and praise, I should mention, some of the criticism from the right seems very hypocritical because on the one hand, the right claims to oppose the fundamentalist type regimes of places like Saudi Arabia. So you would think that they would support Michelle Obama not wearing the particular attire that might be expected of her. But at the same time, they criticize her for not respecting Saudi Arabia.
Well, she was not breaking the law in Saudi Arabia. I think it's different if you go into a mosque or something like that. Any chance to criticize the president or the first lady will be utilized.
I think that as the First Lady of the United States, Mrs. Obama is an American and a woman, and there are differences in terms of not only what the expectations are within different religions, and remember that Michelle Obama's religion is different than that of Saudi Arabia, but there are differences in terms of the country and the cultural expectations, and as a head of state, Michelle Obama should not be expected to conform to all religious or cultural beliefs. That doesn't mean that she or the president may not sometimes choose to conform, and that should be fine as well.
Right, because she is there representing the United States, right, in a very particular way. I mean, if a tourist shows up, they're not really there to represent their country or their religion.
The Koch brothers are going to try to buy the 2016 election for just under $1 billion. They are going to raise what they expect to be $889 million from their wealthy donors and kind of coalition for the 2016 elections, according to the Washington Post. This is far more than any outside group has ever raised during a political campaign cycle. And not only that, it is more than either the Democratic or Republican Party raised from 2011 to 2012, according to tallies from the Center for Responsive Politics, estimating that each party raised about $800 million. The Koch brothers, Lewis, one family is going to outraise what the Democratic Party raised in 2012 and what the Republican Party raised in 2012. Can't we just all agree that it's a problem when one family can pull together more contributions than an entire political party?
Just imagine if they had their way with legislation around this, around elections and campaigns. They could just put $1 billion themselves into this election and then raise probably another $1 billion from other sources. It's a huge problem.
And the other question mark is that if the Koch brothers decide to get really involved in the Republican primary, they may be able to decide the Republican primary with this amount of money. If they say, we want to get behind kind of an establishment, safe guy, someone like a Jeb Bush, in spite of the fact that he may be a little too liberal for the mainstream, for the base of the Republican Party, they may be able to do that. Would they be able to push someone like Rand Paul to the nomination? Maybe not, but the fact that it's even a question mark shows how much power this family has. And even if you agree with the Koch brothers on policy, right? Even if in 2016 you personally want the same thing as the Koch brothers, can't any reasonable person realize that in the long term, this amount of power in the hands of one family is a bad thing? I would hope so. But some people seem to just jump on this, hey, money is speech, and they've earned their money, and they've earned their right to disproportionately influence elections.
That's the way to look at it. It's a freedom issue for a lot of people, and a lot of them see no problem with this at all.
Republicans are doing all sorts of gymnastics now on the Medicaid expansion as part of the Affordable Care Act. Indiana Governor, a Republican, Mike Pence, agreed to expand Medicaid under Obamacare yesterday. But if you look at what he said, you wouldn't actually get that impression. Yesterday, Mike Pence said, quote, I believe Medicaid is not a program we should expand. It's a program that we should reform. That's exactly what we're accomplishing, except that when his office announced his plan, they didn't mention the fact that they are expanding Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, which will cover about 350,000 new Indiana residents. And when they tweeted a timeline of their expansion, their state program, they just didn't mention, Lewis, that, hey, guys, by the way, this is the Medicaid expansion that the Affordable Care Act is stipulating, that they will cover 100% of the cost initially and subsequently 90%. They are just doing incredible gymnastics to not mention that.
And I'm sure as a result of this, the people will like it. I mean, it makes sense. It's good for them. And they might be confused as to why this happened. If they have no idea that this is because of Obamacare, they'll just keep hating on Obama.
It's incredible semantics, right? To say that we are going to do an expansion and more people, low-income individuals, are going to be covered. And we're just kind of going to snap our fingers and it's going to happen, when the reality is that this is the federally funded Medicaid expansion. And the reality, of course, goes well beyond that, which is that numerous Republican states, or states with Republican governors, traditionally red states, are doing the Medicaid expansion because it is just a good deal. It is, from the state's point of view, aside from the federal government's analysis, from a state point of view, it is very fiscally conservative, and it's actually really good for business too, because these hospitals will have fewer uninsured individuals coming in, racking up bills, and ultimately not paying them.
Yeah, when the fiscal aspect of this is just so clear, it's hard for even the most conservative Republicans to turn it down.
It's absolutely stunning, and the problem is we could just sit back and laugh and say, well, yeah, they're doing gymnastics to try to avoid admitting that they're expanding Medicaid the exact same way that they claim to have opposed for so long. But it filters down to voters not knowing that the reason that Medicaid was expanded, maybe for them, was the Affordable Care Act. So then they vote for the candidate that opposes the Affordable Care Act, in spite of the fact that they are directly benefiting from it. That, I think, is the way, Lewis, that it is most impacting elections.
Agreed. And the interesting thing about this is that while, yes, it is, they realize that this is going to save them some money, these are probably still a lot of people who, if they had the choice, might completely do away with the program altogether. But of course, it's in place, and this saves the money. It
is truly stunning, the trapeze artist-like nature of what Republicans are doing to avoid just admitting that they're doing the damn thing, Lewis. And that's the way that it really is going. Follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/dpackman. We have Hatriot Mail coming up after the break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is mostly funded by individual viewers through the David Pakman Show membership program. Today's member of the day is Grace Lillian Hardwick. Grace Lillian Hardwick. And it is a very, very special day for Grace, Lewis, because we also have four David Pakman Show Membership Hall of Fame inductees who are now in their fourth year of David Pakman Show membership. Greg Stevens, Norris Wildhagen, Ryan Cruz, and Sang Lim. 4 inductees on the same day to the David Pakman Show Membership Hall of Fame. This has never happened before, Lewis, and all 4 of those individuals now can get any David Pakman Show apparel item of their choice on us for being with us for 4 years. Truly an incredible day.
4 in one day. I'm speechless. That's what are the chances?
This is like that day you bought 12 million memberships. It's just an incredible day, and a day for the show that will truly live in infamy. davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up today. And remember that you can also support our show if you ever use Amazon.com to do any shopping. If you first go to our website, davidpakman.com, and click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page, you will then, by virtue of completing your shopping at Amazon.com, send us a little kickback. So I recommend bookmarking that link and using it whenever you shop. Let's get right into Hatriot Mail.
Because it's God's divine plan that every child be born, but an act of patriotic duty to snuff that bastard if he sets a foot near your stuff. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
I wasn't totally sure what to call today's edition of Hatriot Mail, but I think that it will become clear, to me at least it did, after listening to it a couple of times. Let's listen together.
Oh, look at Parkman Show. Two liberal butt buddies aspiring to bring us the future of crap media. Excuse me if I don't support your pathetic attempt at playing with the big boys.
So we can skip right over the kind of homophobic undertone suggesting that Lewis and I are in some kind of gay relationship, in spite of the fact that not only are we not in a relationship with each other, we both date women and also live halfway across the country from each other. We don't really need to comment on that part anymore because that's pretty common. But what I do like, Lewis, is Parthatic. I think this is the Parthatic edition of Hatriot Mail.
It's a great word. Maybe we can incorporate it into our dialogue. It just rolls off the tongue so nicely.
When you invented the word feverent, I found it to be a Parthatic attempt to pander to the audience. Would that be using it in a sentence?
I guess. We could develop a new meaning for it. It doesn't have to mean the same thing as the word that Hatriot was trying to spell.
All right, let's talk about deflategate involving our New England Patriots, Lewis, who are now just days away from playing in the 49th Super Bowl. New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft is now demanding an apology from the NFL regarding deflategate, if indeed they are not able to provide any actual evidence that someone associated with the team deliberately deflated footballs below the allowed pressure. And so much has been going on related to this, Lewis. And I think that at this point, even if the Patriots did deliberately do this, which we don't seem to have any proof of at this point, that it is going to be very hard to find some kind of evidence that says that is what took place.
Yes, I think it's going to be pretty much impossible to prove, partially because I believe that at least none of the higher ups on the team, like the coach or the quarterback, had anything to do with this if someone did tamper with them.
If you can't, the football was found to be a little bit below the allowed lowest pressure for football's inflation. You would think that if it is indeed true that you cannot tell as a quarterback the difference in terms of 1 to 1.5 pounds per square inch of pressure, if the quarterback can't really tell the difference between balls varying in pressure to that amount, that it would be a really big risk for Bill Belichick or someone else to say, let's do this, because the advantage it would give you might not balance out with the risk if you get caught.
I don't think that Belichick would take a risk like that over something that would give you such a marginal advantage. I don't think Brady would either. It's just, it's not logical. It's not worth the risk. They're smarter than that.
And meanwhile, as if the things could get even worse for people hating the New England Patriots and many Boston sports teams in general, Kim Kardashian told the USA Today that she's pulling for the Patriots in the upcoming Super Bowl because she wants to see Giselle, also known as Tom Brady's wife, be happy. Quote, I like when she's watching her husband play and she gives a little insight. I like seeing the girls get all dressed up for the guys to see their game. She also took a position on Deflategate, saying, it's interesting. I think they played well. They deserve the spot. And, I don't really know if it's rumors that happened, if it's fact, or just if that's really what happens. I'm excited to watch the game. Yikes. I don't normally care what Kim Kardashian has to say about anything, but I have a feeling this is going to make people hate the Patriots even more.
Maybe. It might make some of them like the Patriots even more. She's a very powerful woman for some reason.
Yes, apparently so. The Patriots right now, I can't figure out, Lewis, who's favored in this thing. It seems that it's the Seahawks by 1 or 2 points, according to most of the odds websites I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very tough game for the Patriots, but I think the Patriots are the better team. Of course, in the last two Super Bowls they were in, they were also the better team, and somehow they lost to the Giants and Eli Manning, which is a disaster.
Let's talk a little bit about the legal marijuana and cannabis industry. It is the fastest growing industry in the United States. And if the trend towards legalization spreads towards all 50 states, marijuana could overtake the organic food industry in size, according to a new report that has been obtained by the Huffington Post. Researchers from the ArcView Group, a cannabis industry investment and research firm, found that the U.S. market for legal cannabis grew 74% in 2014 to $2.7 billion, up from $1.3 billion in 2013. The group surveyed hundreds of medical and recreational marijuana retailers in states where sales are legal, as well as ancillary business operators and independent cultivators of the plant over the course of 7 months during 2013 and 2014. The report projects a very strong year for legal marijuana in 2015, projecting 32% growth for the market. Over the next 5 years, there are expectations that it will continue to grow. ArcView projects that 14 more states will legalize recreational marijuana and 2 more will legalize medical marijuana. Yeah, obviously, if we have a more marijuana legalization, this is just a business that is going to explode. And you would think that that's really good, right? Because you're going to fund states, you're going to fund all sorts of stuff, but it is actually going to be really bad for the private prison and war on drugs industrial complex. It is going to be bad for those who make money from keeping marijuana illegal, and this includes the bail bonds industry, which I read about recently, a very interesting article. So yes, there is a lot of money to be gained from this, but there is also a lot of industries that won't like it. And then, of course, if you're just straight up racist and you like the war on drugs being used to disproportionately imprison non-white individuals for nonviolent drug offenses, you really hate the legalization of marijuana.
And there will be a lot of money lost over this, but we are headed in a clear direction. And of course, there's plenty of money to be made. And I want to get in on this somehow. And I don't, I hope that doesn't mean just buying some tobacco company stock. I'd like to be involved in other ways.
And as Lewis is alluding to, there are tobacco companies that have started to try to patent or get involved in different THC-related research and patents. And this, talking about the business side and the growers and the buyers and all that stuff, the growers and the sellers rather, that's all well and good. But we have to remember that there is a far uglier side to this, other than just the business benefits that can be reaped and the profits, which is the unjust and arguably immoral incarceration of nonviolent drug offenders, both users and low-level sellers. And that is just a huge part of this, aside from the business opportunity that this represents.
And after we have legalization or at least decriminalization across the country, you can still count on there being a war on drugs. And, the feds and police will still actively be pursuing cocaine and heroin and meth and all of the other drugs.
Join us on our Reddit discussion forum. Go to davidpakman.com/Reddit. REDDIT. I'm on there every day, answering people's questions, responding, talking about show topics. A lot of action on there. davidpakman.com/Reddit. C. Edmund Wright returns to the program after this. Did his cataclysmic predictions about the Affordable Care Act come true? We will talk to him next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm pleased to welcome back onto the program C. Edmund Wright, columnist for Breitbart, American thinker, contributor at Newsmax TV, also author of WTF, How Karl Rove and the Establishment Lost Again. Edmund, you were last on in October of 2013, and I reviewed that interview this morning. I wanted to have it fresh in my mind, and you had a lot to say about the Affordable Care Act and about Obamacare, including that it is going to be a disaster, it's expensive, it's not going to work, it's going to be unpopular. Are you ready now, in January of 2015, to tell us you were wrong back in 2013?
No, we've had three devastating reports come out in the last day about just how bad it is. There was one today from the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, and we all remember how important the CBO was in getting this passed. That says now 10 million people are going to lose their health coverage through their workplace. That's more than the 8 million who newly insured. So we're at a net negative 2 million people being covered as a result. And then the UK Daily Mail yesterday had a report that it's going to cost the taxpayers $50,000 per enrollee. That's not including what the enrollees are going to pay. David, in all of recorded world history, nothing's ever been improved by a massive bureaucracy, and this won't be either.
I'm shocked by what you're saying because none of what you said seems to actually be what the Congressional Budget Office has said. I mean, just yesterday we reported on the fact that the Affordable Care Act over the next 10 years is actually going to cost 20% less than what was initially projected. You're right when it comes to uninsured in one sense, which is that 10 or 15 years from now, we are going to have, in part because of population increases, many millions of people who are not insured, and that is always an issue that we have to tackle. But 20% less than anticipated is what the CBO said yesterday in terms of the cost of the Affordable Care Act.
I didn't see that. I can't comment on that. I wouldn't believe it. But again, let's go back to the 10 million uninsured, or that will be newly uninsured. The Affordable Care Act was supposed to insure the uninsured. What it's actually doing in greater numbers is uninsuring the previously insured.
Edmund, let's be very, very clear so we can get your opinion on this. Do you believe today that the net number of uninsured people in this country has increased or decreased since the passage of the Affordable Care Act?
I think that it's until more companies fully understand the impact on them, it might be a little premature to say.
So what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that the private for-profit insurers that you defend as the best delivery mechanism to provide health care don't even know how many customers they have? Is that what you're saying?
No. First of all, I believe in the concept of private insurance. I do not like any of the practitioners of it currently in the health insurance industry, with very few exceptions, because they jumped in bed with Obamacare on the basis of 35 million new customers. So understand that whenever you talk about a crony capitalist company, you're not talking about free enterprise. You're not talking about the kind of free enterprise I support.
Hey, you and I agree on that. No complaints there.
Right. And the market is doing great things with auto insurance. It's to say that Obamacare, because it's still using private insurers, is a private industry situation is just not true, David. I mean, it's run by government mandate. All the rules are written by government, which was done, by the way, so people would blame the private healthcare industry.
No, but I don't know that that's fair, Edmund. I don't know that that's fair, because most industries are subject to regulation, and I don't know that we can say that thus they are not actually private industries.
None like banking and insurance. Those two are way overly regulated.
I guess I'm actually kind of taken aback that we are having such a fundamentally different understanding of even what the CBO said. So let me take a step back for a second from that. Mitt Romney said, and I'm not accusing you of being a huge fan of Mitt Romney or not, or otherwise. I'm just saying what Mitt Romney said. Mitt Romney did say during the run-up to the 2012 election that if he were elected president, he would get us to below 6% or to 6% when it comes to unemployment by the end of what would have been his first term. In other words, January of 2017. And that in order to do that, he would need to repeal the Affordable Care Act because he believed that it was a real job killer. Now, in January of 2015, we sit at 5.8% unemployment, 2 years prior to when Mitt Romney said he would get us to 6% without a repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Do you believe that the Affordable Care Act has not killed jobs the way many on the right predicted?
No, what I believe is that we have more unemployed adults in this country than at any time in history. I believe that the way we kept score for unemployment under George W. Bush If we were doing it that same way today, workforce participation at similar levels, we'd have about 9 or 10% statistical U3 and about 15 to 17% statistical U6.
Oh no,
So,
Edmund, you're a smart guy. I don't believe that you believe that. I don't believe that you believe that.
Jay Leno made jokes about it. Now, the Mitt Romney campaign was too stupid to understand what Jay Leno and his audience understood. But this is what it is.
But Edmund, this is the biggest ruse out there. I would encourage you for a second to look at the recent data put out by Bob Detrick from Polaris Financial Partners, which outlines that the U3 and the U6 have essentially moved in parallel and have been measured the same way dating back to Ronald Reagan, and that the idea that today the U6 is particularly bad relative to the U3 is a complete farce. There is no data that supports that.
I'm not talking about U6 versus U3. I'm talking about U3 now versus U3 in the past, and also U6 now versus U6 in the past. But nobody deals in U6 very much, so just keep it at U3, the baseline unemployment rate. Fact of the matter is we got 93 million non-working adults. That cannot work in a country of only a little over 300 million. There's no way that works, and that number has skyrocketed.
Edmund, will you admit, you know what, I don't think that 93 million is the right number, but for a second, let's pretend that it is, okay? Just as a thought experiment.
Okay.
Will you concede that those citing that number are including people who are retired and those who are 18 to 22 and in college full-time as people who are unemployed right now?
I don't know if it includes the college. It does include the retirement. Look, I didn't say it should be 0. I said it should probably be 60, 65 million, not 93 million. We have a skyrocketing number of people who've dropped off the grid, and they're just, getting disability insurance, almost half of which is mental disability insurance. And we know the scams and some of the physical disability. We have more people taking more advantage of more government handout programs now than ever.
That's not true, Edmund. Any system of social welfare will have some free riders, but
Sure.
very often, the cost of additional monitoring to eliminate those free riders will exceed the savings of reducing free ridership to 0.
Right.
It's not even fiscally conservative to pursue that.
No, but it is fiscally conservative to change the incentives. 99 weeks of uninsurance is an awful economic incentive. It's a disincentive for what we need, which is more people producing and more people working and fewer people being freeloaders. We've set up a system that encourages that. We've done it with illegal immigration. Come to this country and immediately get on the government dole. I'm talking about the disincentives up front, not necessarily the policing on the back end.
Last thing I want to touch on, we have here a situation where the individual provisions of the Affordable Care Act are increasingly popular with all of Americans. We have more than half of the country actually interested in single-payer health care, and we have President Obama's approval rating matching that at this point in his presidency of Ronald Reagan at this point in his presidency, and higher than George W. Bush's. President Obama is doing quite well, isn't he?
I don't know that he's doing quite well. I think that you can talk about a survey of 1,500 people here and there by some media organization, or you can look at what 100 million people said in November. I'll take the big scoreboard, and what they said in November is that he's not doing very well. Now, listen, Mitch McConnell and John Boehner are too stupid to figure that out, so that's part of Obama's biggest advantage. Is the loyal opposition is only loyal to their inside Washington interests.
What do you mean by that? In the sense that what did you mean by 2014?
Right. The Republican establishment, and I mentioned this in the book, by the way, the Republican establishment is so worried about Obama's popularity, they never go after him, without realizing that the reason George W. Bush went from 90% approval right after 9/11 to down in the 30s was because everybody went after him and he refused to fight back. polls change when the discussion changes, but nobody, with the exception of a few on the right, are having the loyal opposition discussion, and Obama is a huge beneficiary of that.
Yeah, and what I meant was in the 2014 midterms, Republicans only got 52% of the popular vote that was cast, so it's not any big victory. It's not any big takedown. I mean, because of gerrymandering, yes, they won 57% of the seats, but I wouldn't take that to the bank as a mandate, Edmund.
No. Well, okay, the mandate was weakened because the Republican messaging machine wasn't nearly what it was in 2010. But again, the Democrats are going to run up big majorities in the big cities, and that's going to, skew those figures just a little bit. In all of the Senate races where it was basically a mandate on Obama and Obamacare versus the opposition, the Republicans won each and every one of those.
All right, I think we have to give a little more credit to gerrymandering and maybe a little less to just Democrats living in big cities, but that will have to be a conversation for a different day.
Related, they're related topics, by the way.
We've been speaking with C. Edmund Wright. Check him out on Breitbart, American Thinker, and most recently on Newsmax TV. Edmund, always great to have you on, even though we don't agree on much.
That's right, David. You run a great show. I always enjoy it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This is a really funny story from Massachusetts. The Bay State Examiner asked the Massachusetts State Police for copies of the internal affairs files of 49 different state troopers. And after they did that, an attorney for the Mass State Police named Jacqueline Zawada contacted them and said, listen, we're going to need you to pay a fee for us to figure out what the fee will be for providing you all of these records, and saying that it would be $710.50, and that would be a non-refundable research fee to research the fee for providing these records. And the explanation was they are going to need to spend 24 and a half hours figuring out what the fee will be for the records, and that is time that they are going to need to pay for, and that they would be able to maybe reduce that if they were able to narrow the request significantly, basically saying, if you agree not to ask for as many documents, we might be able to get rid of this fee. And this actually may be against the rules in Massachusetts with regard to requesting records from government agencies. You are allowed to request records and then be told what that will cost without paying a fee to estimate that fee. And there's all these, caricatures of Massachusetts as this high fee, high tax state. To some extent, it's true, and to a lot of the extent, it is not true. I mean, taxes here in New York City are far higher. But regardless, this is kind of like a microcosm of the absurdity of bureaucratic fees.
There is that, and I think at the same time, this also shows that the police departments are trying to limit the amount of information that they hand out about their police officers. And I guess it's a form of damage control, or maybe they're just trying to hide things, but I certainly do not like it.
This is like a Russian matryoshka doll equivalent of fees, where you have to unpack each successive layer of fees until you finally get to what it is that you're looking for. And I totally agree that there has to be some undertone here of just not wanting the newspaper to get these records. And this is certainly one way to prevent people from getting information is charging for that information, and charging a fee to determine a fee would be pretty far near the top of the list for absurd ways to make things expensive, wouldn't it?
It certainly would be. I hope that the examiner paid these fees and went through with all of this. I hope this didn't deter them.
ISIS has reportedly been throwing men off of buildings for, quote, being gay. The Islamic State has published disturbing pictures of what they say are the executions of 2 gay men in Iraq being thrown off of high-rise buildings to their deaths off of the roof of the building. The organization has also released images of 2 men being crucified for theft and a woman being stoned to death for infidelity. The two men are seen in the pictures being led to the edge of a tall building as a large crowd gathers below to watch. The men are then photographed falling through the air, and a later photograph shows their bodies on the ground dead. Two other ISIS militants then shoot the two in the head, killing them. A final killing depicts a woman draped in an all-black niqab as she is led to her stoning on charges of infidelity. And ISIS members are seen her throwing rocks at her and waving ISIS flags. I actually can't understand why some of the guys throwing the stones cover their faces. Do they think that God doesn't know who they are if they simply cover their faces when they participate in the killings? And if they believe that these killings are proper and godlike and what God would want, why do they even need to cover their faces?
It's a good question. I'm not really sure. It's just something ISIS fighters do. I'm sure they have a reason for it. Maybe it's some righteous reason that they, I don't know, that they dreamed up. But I read another story that a bunch of ISIS folk executed some people who were watching a soccer game for watching the soccer game. I mean, it's really getting ridiculous.
They are believed to have executed thousands of people since they violently took over parts of Syria and Iraq last year. They have held multiple foreign hostages, as we've talked about, including a number of Western journalists and aid workers, and have beheaded around 5 of them. And let's just remind everybody, ISIS is not the only one doing the beheading. We also see Saudi Arabia, a close ally of the U.S., doing beheading. So there is certainly no shortage of this. And let's remember that there are varying opinions as to how ISIS should be dealt with. And one of the primary questions is, when you're trying to fight an ideology, how do you actually do it? And I think the proof is in that, Lewis, which is, yes, we have ISIS doing these acts, but we also have Saudi Arabia, a government considered legitimate by the United States and a friend to the U.S., doing the same. So would killing whoever we can identify as being part of ISIS do anything to eliminate the ideology that is the catalyst and undertone for all of this type of violence? I don't know that it would.
You might not. The ideology would probably remain, but perhaps if you kill enough members of ISIS, those who support the ideology might decide just to stay at home and not pick up that AK and go out and try to kill people.
If you have any comments, questions, or criticisms about the topics we discussed today or any other topic, you can call our voicemail line 24 hours a day. The number is 219-2-DAVID-P, 219-2-DAVID-P. The Eggman for a second day in a row checking in, this time with a message directed at Lewis. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Lewis. You're correct that nothing in the Constitution states that our right to bear arms has to be registered or insured or anything like that. But the Constitution also grants citizens free passage via roadways, via conveyance. That means we can drive around on roadways on anything we want. So we have to register and insure our vehicles. So for the same reason that we have to do that, we should have to do that to guns also. We have cars and vehicles and things that are way more deadly than we had before. And we have weapons also that are the same. So just as we have to register our vehicles now, we should have to register guns and have insurance on them. So when our 2-year-old shoots somebody in Walmart, the stupid mother can go to jail or pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, which is only fair, right, guys?
Yeah, what do you think about that, Lewis? Eggman makes a good point, which is we regulate other products and services and areas of business that are not directly okayed by the Constitution, and that's not a problem. Why couldn't we have mandatory gun insurance?
Eggman makes a good point. If what he says is true, yeah, I mean, there is insurance for cars, and if the Constitution says what he says it says, great point, Eggman. And just let me clarify, I was not against this idea.
You thought there might just be a legal problem with it.
Perhaps, right.
On today's bonus show, the medical instruments on Blackbeard's ship. One of the 2 surviving Star Trek phasers will be going to auction, and Apple's biggest quarterly profit ever. Are they going to pay any taxes? I think that's a pretty relevant question. Lewis will talk to us about all of those stories and more on today's bonus show. I will be there as the sidekick. And you can get access to the bonus show by becoming a David Pakman Show member at davidpakman.com/membership. Support the show and get some great membership benefits too.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.